Well, welcome to Dig In. I'm Jess Gaedeke with Dig Insights, and I am joined today by the man, the myth, Barry Jennings, Director, Cloud and Commercial Business Planning Insights at Microsoft. Barry, I'm so glad you're here. I mean it. I learn every time that we talk. I take away something new. So I know we're going to have a really memorable conversation today. Thanks for being here.
I am glad to be here and looking forward to how this turns out. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out how manly or how mythical I need to be over the next 30 minutes or so.
Be yourself. We already said you're the king of insights, so just go with it.
Oh, yeah, it's not supposed to get out.
Adopt that persona. So tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. My name is Barry Jennings. I run a research team that's focused on our cloud business. Actually, my team has three parts. One of it is focused on Azure, and that's everything from cloud infrastructure and data and AI products, and also our developer tools. Another part of my team is focused on pricing and bundling and all sorts of really cool things. We have a function at Microsoft called monetization, and that's how do we look at all these products and services and um create the right value. And then the third thing, I have a team that's focused on doing integrated marketing support. We support an integrated marketing team with research that's focused on all of our commercial products. So I get to touch a pretty wide variety of Microsoft's portfolio, and I am all B2B all the time.
Yeah.
In terms of my background, um, I was in college, and one day I get a call from my parents. Hey, we won't be able to help you as much as we thought we would. You need to get a job, dude. Uh, and I got three. And one of
Sure.
my jobs was, and I will be aging myself here, but I was a telephone interviewer at a market research company. Uh,
Okay.
I kind of like to talk. I did pretty well. I could work a 4:30 to 9:30 shift, so it was perfect for school. And then I could walk back to the University of Texas, go to the library and see if there was any spare pizza left in the other rooms. Um, but it was interesting. I did pretty well at the job, and in a few months, I was actually a supervisor managing, people on the phone. A lot of older gentlemen getting a little retirement gig, people who like to talk, um, and I learned a ton. And then eventually, I was like running the field. I was really young, running this whole field organization, caddy center, and all, or no, this was straight telephone interviewing. Then we eventually migrated to a caddy system, which was an
Hmm.
interesting thing, and on and on and on. And we did everything from toilet paper to technology. I did social science work for like the RANDs and MDRCs of the world, and everything in between. And so it was pretty cool. When I finished school, I kind of went to the research side, became a research manager, got to learn surveys and all that stuff. I did data entry, I did data processing, uh, and it was cool. It was a really good, broad set of experiences. Um, and then, I was married, started making babies, started needing a little more money. So I went to a company called IntelliQuest, which was focused on technology brands. I went there to go and help be a research manager on a practice that did technology brand tracking at the time. And this was sort of just before the dot-com bubble. So
Sure.
technology brands were getting hot. And it was really cool and interesting. And I learned a ton. I did international research. I learned how to do better reporting. I learned, it was really, really just transformational for me in a lot of ways. Um, and then the back half of my time there, I moved to the team that did pricing research. My roommate is now the CEO of Sawtooth Software.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, and I got to work with like a Rich Johnson and a couple of other like luminaries in that field, I mean, it was cool. We literally did conjoint studies, burned them to a CD-ROM, and we mailed them to people with a $2 bill,
Sure.
and they actually sent it back. Things you absolutely couldn't do today. But I learned a ton on doing that as well. And then after a while, you know, I knew a good amount about research, but I didn't know what the heck happened with the stuff. And so Dell was one of our customers. They
Mhm.
had an opening, and I jumped to Dell. I spent 18 years at Dell. I did everything from consumer laptops to small business desktops, uh, and everything. I spent the vast bulk of my time focused on SMB, but also on servers, storage, and networking in our whole enterprise business, which was, Dell's role was to say, hey, we can do it better and cheaper. And that is how Dell grew at that time. And so it was a really, really cool ride. After about 18 years or so, I was sort of working remotely. Um, they were at the phase of going public again or going private again. Michael Dell did that a few times. And they had a cool voluntary separation package. And I'm like, did the math. I was like, I could afford to take a chance. And I did. I went to a company called BlackBerry, and that was fun. It was a brand that had really big problems to solve,
Mhm.
really big problems to solve. And it was interesting. I learned a ton. I got to form a brand new team. I got to try and help the company make a big pivot towards more B2B, which was why I was there to get them out of trying to compete with an iPhone and consumer and more focused on the commercial side. And they were doing security stuff and all that other stuff. And I mean, it was tough. The company was going through really rough times. Learned that really great research and strategy recommendations can't undo not great decision making. And at some point, it was time for me to leave there. Uh, by then, my wife had gotten a job at Microsoft. We were living in the Pacific Northwest. I put a couple of feelers out, and I got a role at Microsoft. And I've been here for the past 8 years.
Is your wife still at Microsoft too?
No, I am really stable. Usually, I dig in. She will germinate a lot of flowers. So she left Microsoft, then she went to Amazon, loved it there, left Amazon, went to HBO Max to launch that product, left that, then she went to Google. And that's where she is right now. She is a UX researcher at Google.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I have to say too, Barry, you just said that you're very stable, you dig in. Did you mean to conjure the name of our podcast when you were giving that description?
As long as I don't have to pay you for using your name.
You can use it. It's yours to use. Well, thank you so much for giving us that background. And I know that we're going to dig into some of that experience as we talk. But just first, what do you love about what you do? Clearly, you started in market research many years ago, and you've been doing it now for a few decades. So, what do you love about it?
Yeah, I have a person on my team I had a one-on-one with a while ago, and um, she was having a little conflict with one of her stakeholders, and I was like, well, just keep asking until you get an answer. It's like you literally get paid to ask questions,
Yeah.
uh, and that's a cool job. I like that because when you ask questions, you can learn, and
Hmm.
there's always a question, which means there's always something to learn. And so I've been in technology for it can be measured in decades, not just years. And so I've seen a whole ton of change. And the questions that I'm trying to answer now are totally different than the ones than when I started.
Sure.
And the ones that I will answer next year and the year beyond will be different still, and that's energizing.
Yeah.
I can never be the one who knows everything. I can hopefully be the one that gets the chance to learn everything, and that really, really keeps me hooked into the insights game.
Yeah, I bet. And especially in the technology industry, it's just phenomenal. Okay, well then, if it's all right with you, I'm gonna dig in because our listeners, they really do crave inspiration from leaders, and I think one of the best ways to inspire is to share a story. And I know that you were integral in the launch of many products over that couple of decades in the technology industry. And one that I think you shared was as a pretty good learning experience was at Dell. So I'd
Yeah,
love for you to tell us how the product launch, how did the idea originate, what inspired it? It's kind of a big deal, so I want to get into it.
absolutely. So Dell's is still a direct manufacturer of technology. And in the early days, I wasn't there super early when the stock was like tripling like every other month. If so, we may not be talking
Right.
right
Different path.
now. But I was definitely there during some hot growth years and when we were doing some pretty innovative things. One of the hallmarks of Dell was working closely with Microsoft and Intel at the time. They were able to make computing way more affordable. Their direct model was just groundbreaking at the time, and it was you went online, you configured a thing, and they sent it to your house,
Mhm.
and that was really novel.
Yeah.
And as we expanded, one of the key areas that Michael wanted us to get into was this area called technical workstations. So way back then, people would do this thing called 3D graphics, doing things that many of us can do on our phone now. But back then, it took really rich, robust systems to go and do that. And in 1995 ish, um, we went down that pathway. And we said, hey, we're going to get into this technical workstation business. Now, technical workstations, these are, and you may know some data science folks who have some of these systems now. They're big. They've got four processors. They're really powerful. They sit under the desk. They look like mini servers.
Hmm.
Um, but all of that computing power helps them do things like 3D graphics and modeling and engineering. And that's how the folks at Boeing, for example, use workstations to do airflow calculations because you need more than your typical laptop. Um, and it was a compelling business because the players they were just really expensive. Silicon Graphics they were charging massive amounts of money. They were using risk chips at the time, and it was really really expensive. And at that time, Intel had a processor. Microsoft had an operating system that was just able to do more. And so we said, hey, we think we can put things together and get into the workstation business. And it was interesting. I got to talk to engineers and scientists and all sorts of folks to really figure out how do we make this thing. We did a ton of research. It was awesome. And we came up with this thing that, again, this was 1995, right? That was the year that the DVD came out.
Hmm.
That was the year that the PlayStation came out in the US. So it was definitely an inflection point year in many ways. And we built a machine that can credibly run all of these applications using Windows software and Intel hardware or Intel processors inside of Dell machines. And it was a fraction of the cost. Now we had to get over things like building credibility, and I don't think at that time we were doing things that could model nuclear explosions and stuff like that. But to help with designing a car or to help with doing certain things with the weather and all sorts of stuff like that, there was a credible place. Uh, and I think it was exciting and interesting, and I learned perhaps one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned in my corporate career. And that came when we had to come up with a name for this system. We did naming research,
Hmm.
and it is never my favorite.
It's
Probably,
tough.
yeah, and probably especially due to I attribute a lot of my taste for it due to this project. Because we did a ton of research. We talked to a lot of people. We did all the due diligence, the legal stuff, all that stuff. We came up with some names. We had a winner. And my stakeholders, they were all on board. This is going to be the name. And we, it built, it had progress. And I'm earlier in the career then. I'm not a part of all of the conversations, but I was like, yes, our name is in there. They said they sold it in. And then there was a big meeting and marketing VPs and all this other stuff. And I get an email. Hey, we're going to change the name of the product. It's going to go out. It's just going to be called the Dell Workstation 400. Dell Workstation 400. Are you kidding me? And that's what we launched. It wasn't a cool, sexy name. We eventually created the name Precision Workstation that still exists today.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, what the heck? And I had a one-on-one with somebody in Power, and I'm like, I don't understand. We spent all this time. We spent all this money. We did all this work. We are convicted that we had a great name. Everybody agreed with it. And it was everybody but Michael.
Oh, really?
And so, key learning, we really got to understand who is making that decision. And again, that's often tricky. But at the end of the day, I'm an input. And I give these inputs to other people who give inputs. And we give them to people who do make decisions. And sometimes those people who do make decisions, there's a bigger fish. And the bigger fish made a decision. And I was heartbroken. And for a hot minute, I was confused. Again, I always thought it was research, and the research said this.
Right.
And, oh my God, why would you not trust the research? And it wasn't about that at all. I eventually learned. He made a decision for a specific reason. It turned out to probably be the right decision. We did wind up on a last name, on a different name. And it came out at a time when the product was having momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the brand grew, it thrived, and it worked out well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was absolutely one of those things that burned into my mind. And it really makes me think, who's really doing this? It made me think about research differently as well. And it made me really start understanding or trying to understand business in relation to the research decisions.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes we get enamored with, hey, we learned a thing, and we have to get into the realm of how are we going to help the business make the best decision possible. And it was pretty big learning for me.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I mean, so that's an important lesson to learn, and it was painful at the time, but have you used that to then coach your teams now? Because you've developed so many insights professionals in your career. Do you coach them to really think about the ultimate decision that we made and who's going to make the decision and the role of the data that they're producing in that decision, and just almost like, I don't know, contingency plan if you do have one of those senior leaders come in at the end?
Yeah, right now I go like day one. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, really, what are we trying to solve for?
Mm-hmm.
And who do we have to really navigate to make it work? I never thought about that. Again, back then, I'm earlier in my career. It was more like, this is the way things work. And I learned, no, that's not how things really work in some situations. There are externalities that you can't always think about. That happens today. I'm sure my CEO today is in a room looking at data and making decisions. That's what they get paid to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great time in your life to kind of reflect back and being part of that product launch at a time when the workplace and the workforce was changing so rapidly. It's just kind of cool to think about then versus now. And like to your point, the problems keep changing, but the dynamic nature of the industry, that part has not slowed down, right?
Not at all. Not at all. And again, that's very energizing. We are on the precipice of something really, really big right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember many of the other really, really, really big too. Mobile, the web. right?
Yeah.
And they've transformed society, how we work. And I think this moment around AI will do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just early days, and I am quite certain my beliefs today will be upended in the coming months and years as we start grappling with what this is and putting things into practice.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to pre-book a follow-up episode when you can talk to me about that big thing, because I'm sure you can't share about it now, but I'd love to hear that story when the time's right.
Yeah, totally not trying to get fired today. So it sure
That's
thing.
not your goal. Makes sense. Well, let's turn to you as a thought leader because, Barry, you're super involved in the industry, obviously very impactful at your organization, but also in the market research industry. So, what would you say is one of your most controversial or passionate opinions about the state of innovation right now? You know, you just mentioned AI. I don't know if it has to do with anything, in that realm, but I'd love to hear kind of what do you get fired up about?
That is a great question. Right now, I'm on this AI task force with SOMAR, and it's this AI task force where we're really doing lots of roundtables around AI and how it's going to impact the research industry. Um, at, in my job, I have our leadership team, me and my peers. We have these shared priorities, and one of them is to use AI to help transform our function. What does that look like? And so we're trying a whole ton of things. Some of them suck, some of them are fantastic. Um, we're learning our way through it by just trying, and it's fairly energizing. Again, we're looking at everything that everybody else is looking into, from synthetic sample to, what does this do from a technique perspective, to what are the things that are going to make us more efficient within our day.
Hmm.
And those are all cool. One of the things that I believe, though, and I don't know if it's that controversial, and maybe it is, I think um, human to human qualitative will thrive. Uh, I am not. I am not anti synthetic data. It will probably have its place. I have no idea just yet. I don't know what I don't know yet because it's still very, very early days there. But um, humans know humans really well,
Hmm.
and I mean, getting back to my Dell story, the data would suggest that this is the decision. Um, but there was a human being involved in that
Sure.
decision,
Yeah.
and it ended up
Yeah.
differently. And if I were differently connected back then to that decision making, perhaps my approach would have been different. Perhaps I would have, um, I knew his administrative assistant at the time, and I'm like, maybe I would say, hey, how's he feeling today? Is this a good day to pitch it? She might have said, no, it's a bad day.
Right.
Uh, right, it's little things like that, that human element. But I do think yeah, qualitative is just going to grow. It's
Mhm.
going to get stronger. It will be very personal, and I think that that's just it's something that we see right now in a lot of different ways. Um, I my first big project at Microsoft, I had to measure market share from for a product and how it was evolving over time. Things shifted just a little bit, and we kind of had to create a way to sort of measure and understand and look at the cloud. And we did that, and we used a lot of techniques and all sorts of really cool things. Uh, and at the end of the day, we said, you know what? I don't know what this is. Do you know what it is? I don't really know what it is. You know what we need to do? We need to go talk to some people who do know. And the amount of IDIs and groups that we did in conjunction with this work just grew, and our
Yeah.
understanding grew. Our ability to make sense of it just got stronger, and that our ability to sell it in just got that much stronger. It matters to bring a customer's perspective, uh, and I just don't think that that's going to shift. If anything, it may grow. Might get harder, but I think it's going
Yeah.
to grow.
Well, and so you're saying that the human to human qualitative that it will thrive. And so I'm curious because, historically, qualitative research is used in the sort of more exploratory phases, right? Sort of foundational and exploratory, and then quantitative is used to validate. And I'm curious if you think that with the, advances in AI, will that almost flip where because there's so much machine learning and, language models that we're learning from, that's going to be how we uncover new opportunities, but to validate those opportunities, that's where we go human to human. I'm just curious, do you think that'll shift a little bit?
Yes, and maybe. I think that, yeah, again, very early days. A paper recently came out where they were doing perceptual maps using large language machines. And it's a big 50-page paper. I read an article and I downloaded the paper, which I'm going to read this weekend, hopefully. But yeah, I can easily see. I mean, that's one of the beauties of AI. It can sense patterns. It can see things that we cannot see. It can look at data at scale. I can absolutely see that potentially unearthing some insights that we just typically wouldn't see, and that's cool. And I think that's where that qual will come in because let's run it by
Mm-hmm.
some people. Let's go really dig in. Let's go see how if that is the right answer. How do we sell it? How do we talk about it? What does what is the pathway to make it work? I think that will be the dance. Quite frankly, I think there's a yeah. I feel quite strongly that you know qualitative ain't going anywhere. It will shift. It might leverage different techniques, like I don't know, Vox Pop Me, for example, is a unique and different way of doing qualitative. I couldn't tell you the last time I sat behind the glass, especially especially due to the pandemic. But
Yeah.
I will say, um, I have a fantastic team of folks who do work, and I realize right now I'm more overhead to some degree. But I make a point to listen to customers talk. I have people put them on my calendar, and I make time to sit in on an IDI so I can learn more about what's going on
Yeah.
and how folks are thinking and making decisions. And I can't imagine that radically changing. And I don't know, maybe 5, 10 years from now, we trust things differently. Um, but I still think there's just going to be the potential to go and do that. I'm not a salesperson. I have great respect for our sales teams, and I support them sometimes. But one of the things I do know is they get into conversations.
Mm-hmm.
They don't talk to bots; they talk to people.
Sure.
And they have to move those people, and I think that's qualitative. How do we talk to the people and move the people, or at least figure out how the people can move our people based off of what they say?
And that's so reassuring coming from not just Microsoft, but someone in your capacity that's working in B2B, that you actually do see that human being on the other end of your product and that you do value that not just voice of customer, but the dialogue. And we completely agree that qualitative is not dead, it's thriving. It's thriving at Dig Insights for sure. It's a big part of how we support clients. And so I'm very reassured to hear you and your role kind of play that back. So thank you for
Well,
that.
that's my reality.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's turn to the final dig. This is all about you, Barry, as a consumer. So you've been telling us about, your professional vibe. Now we want to get into just really just Barry. What makes you tick? So, what's the last product or service that you bought on impulse?
You said what makes me tick. That's so funny. I wish we had like if this was a script. The last expensive thing that I bought on a whim was a watch. Uh, an
Oh, nice.
expensive watch. I had a milestone birthday, and I'm like, I think I should have one of those. And so I bought one, and it was, yeah, expensive, and it didn't displace my Apple Watch, but it looks good when I have to put on a tuxedo and go to a gala. So yeah, that was surprising even to me.
Yeah, very cool. And God, how often are you going to galas, Barry? I mean, what I'm missing out on some social scenes here.
Look, I married well, so let's just say I have two different tuxes, and they get good use within a year. So
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So speaking of marriage, then I love this question, and I'm so curious how you'll answer it. But we know that brands have very distinct personalities. So if you could think of a brand that you'd really enjoy dating, and then a brand that you'd really commit to, you'd really lean in there. What brands would personify that for you?
Ruffles potato chips. I
It
love
sounds like a
Ruffles.
party.
They're awesome. And I think marrying them would make me just like a really fat, unhealthy person. But you gotta have a little fat in your life. And they are a guilty pleasure. You sit on the couch, you get the bag, you regret finishing the bag, but you finish it every time. And it's that thing that you do in front of when you Netflix and chill.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, that would be the thing I think I would date.
Mm-hmm.
What I would marry. This will sound weird, but um, my neighbor is British, and he had a friend give him his Scotch collection. His friend was going to become a teetotaler for some reason, and so whenever I go over, we have a Scotch, and each one of them is different. And there's one brand that's like, oh my god, that's really good. It's Dalmore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and uh, well, I just keep a bottle handy, not handy, like I drink all the time. That would be bad, but it is just so good, and it's um, somebody once told me, if you're gonna have a drink, have that one drink that you love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, that is good every single time, consistent. I'm not a humongous drinker, but man, that is my Mary thing. It is solid, pleasing, uh, does the trick. Probably a little
Potato
boring,
chips
but
and scotch.
yeah. Well,
I love it. And that's not boring at all. I know exactly the brand you're talking about. An excellent package design too. So,
yeah.
um, and then what's a category or a brand, or maybe it's a specific product, but you could rationalize any price point for, you just got to have this product in your life.
iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. I just think about how many things I do in my life with that thing. I got a little warning that my online storage was getting a little full, and I was like, maybe I'll delete some pictures and some videos and some stuff. And I look at it, it's like, holy crap, I have 32,000 pictures.
Yep.
32,000 pictures, right? And
Yep.
yes, some of them are of food. I don't do that very much, thank God. Uh, but I have a daughter, and so I have to take at least 12 pictures to get one that she will approve of me keeping.
I know.
Uh,
Like,
right.
yep.
You
Yep.
can do that with film, and I'm not lost very long. I can find a cool restaurant in any city. Um, every once in a while, I get this thing that I can barely read it is, and I can triple click that side button, and I got a magnifying glass. I dropped something on the floor in an airplane. Wait a minute, I have a flashlight.
Yep.
And so just something that's sort of always there. It's sort of and always useful.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone in saying that that's the product that is just, it's so integral that it doesn't really matter what it costs anymore. I totally
Right,
get
right.
that. Yeah. And what keeps you inspired at work? Like you said, you've been doing this a long time. What keeps you inspired?
That's easy, actually. My team.
Hmm.
I get to help develop talent. I get to watch them do great things. Uh, I get to kibitz really smart people.
Hmm.
Uh, and like I tell them all the time, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, we are in some big trouble. Uh, but I can take what I've learned. I can take my perspectives. I know enough about the industry, about the market, about our products, about research, enough about all those things to be dangerous, where I think I'm adding a little bit of value to them. But at the end of the day, they are driving impact left, right, and center. My team, It's really cool, and it's maybe it's a humble brag, um, but we have a sizable business in which we work for, and we touch an important part of it. And it's really cool to see something like earnings announcements, and it calls out like the growth is due to that thing that you work on. And it's not like it's Ruffles or an iPhone that you actually know what it is. It's cloud infrastructure, networking, storage, processing power, and some services. Like if you're a developer or an IT guy, you get it. But apps run on these things. Everybody knows those apps that run on the thing. We
Yeah.
make the thing so that that can happen, and so that your email actually works and your badge reader lets you into your building.
Yeah.
And it's important, and it's just really cool to be able to drive that portion of the business that you know really keeps us vibrant and growing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that that does inspire you because it's very important. And sometimes we get so lost in the day to day. And if you've worked on a brand for a number of years, it can sometimes feel like, oh, I'm just, still running the same thing. But when you work on a brand that has such an impact on so many people every day, literally how many professionals right now, Barry, are using products and services that you've had a hand in? It's pretty cool. So I'm glad to hear that you pause and reflect on that every once in a while because you should feel good about it.
Absolutely. Context is queen. And I think once we have a context for what we're doing, yeah, it really gets you to think about it a different way. And hopefully it helps you get up in the morning and sign on or go into work and try to make some impact.
Yeah. So we started with King of Insights and we're concluding with Context is Queen. I love this. I think we have some bookends that feel really good.
Look at that. You caught up on that. I'm so impressed.
Well, I'm impressed by you, sir. I'm so appreciative that you joined this conversation today. So pleased to have you share your story, the lessons learned during your time at Dell and carrying through. I wish we could have dug into the BlackBerry time, but maybe we'll do that next time. But great, great inspiration, Barry. So, and I've appreciated the Teams notifications that I think you've been planting throughout our conversation so that we have constant brand awareness for Microsoft Teams. Is that all part of your plan?
There is no part too small.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being such a leader in our industry.
It was great. Thank you.
All right, guys, until next time, thanks for joining Dig In.